Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. I also make simple baking live series where we pick up a particular bake with an objective in mind. We go through the entire process talking through ingredient selection, the techniques used for baking and determine the results. And today we're making a vanilla cake. Now this is a series that is developing. I have several videos concerning the subject matter here, and today we're just baking that vanilla with cake flour. This is probably the final part of this series where I picked an original recipe that I wanted to adapt to suit the preferences of a wedding cake tasting couple who came and wanted a different sort of texture to their cake. As a result, this developed into a series where the same recipe was baked with a mixture of cake flour and various self-raising flour, and now we're just baking the exact same recipe with cake flour. This is because we want to determine what the outcome of baking with cake flour exclusively is going to look like, and see whether it has any structural differences to the other cakes we have done previously. I'll make sure I link the entire videos concerning the other previous ones we've done in the description box so you can check that out. But the reason why we're using cake flour, if you don't know, is simply because cake flour has less protein, which means that the gluten in cake flour is less in your cake. As a result, it gives you a very delicate and soft textured cake. Unfortunately, in the UK, cake flour is not accessible, or you can pick up unbleached cake flour from Amazon, but at £6 per 1 kilogram, that is supremely expensive, and I don't know any cake makers who are really keen on making that investment. As a result, some of our prior testings and adaptations have involved using a mixture of both to cut cost and also to determine the structural difference, and also replace cake flour with high street brands. Our most recent video was baking with a McDougall's cake self-raising flour, which promises a lighter bake, and we determined that perhaps if you're unable to access cake flour or you don't fancy making the investment, you can replace it with McDougall's cake self-raising flour. In the UK, self-raising flour is simply plain flour that has some fortified ingredients such as vitamins in it and the addition of rising agent. It has no salt. However, in the US, self-rising flour, which is the same in the UK, has a bit of salt added to it. So that is sort of the difference with those ones. But the thing with flour, the cake flour here, which I have already mentioned, is because cake flour, depending on what brand you're using and type, has about a 7 to 10% protein in it, which means the gluten when you bake is less. When gluten is more, you get a tighter, stronger textured bake, like your breads and other baked goods. However, with less protein has less gluten, so as a result, you're likely to get a more delicate cake, and that is in simplistic terms what cake flour does here. The purpose of flour and function in baking also adds to structure to build the cake and stuff like that. But I'm not delving into the techniques of all of that today. We're just going to be focusing on the exact recipe, the goal which I have already explained over here. And I'm going to preheat this oven, which I'll turn to about 160 degrees C for the entire period we're making the cake, and then we'll finish and get that in the bake, and it should bake within an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. In the previous bakes through this testing process, we've been able to bake this for up to exactly an hour, and the good thing is in our last two videos we have been able to stay on course right in the live, and we've seen the live result of the bake. My hope is that we're able to do that, so to be able to kind of make it time efficient and use our time properly. I also have some cupcakes for a client that I would be filling in, so we'll bake our cake first, get it in the oven, and then get on to the cupcakes using a hand mixer. We'll answer some viewer questions from previous videos which I've been able to settle on. I'll answer those. We'll talk you through your needs over here, and then hopefully at the end of this bake we'll get to see the results live. So like I said, I'll be linking the resources from the other videos. To get a full context of what we have done so far, you want to check back on those videos so that you can understand where we started and where we are at. But hopefully today is the final part of the series. But following that, if you have other recommendations or questions you want answered, please let me know and I'll make sure I'll answer them. The goal of these lives is to ensure that we answer your baking problems by undertaking the process, so you can see your question answered through the process, just so that it delivers you value and educates and informs. That is the purpose of this channel. And on the homepage there are videos which are edited in specific forms and formats with cake decorating and baking tutorials that should inform you. So do yourself a favor and peruse around the homepage, get yourself acquainted with the channel, and if you haven't already subscribed yet, what are you doing? Hit the subscribe button. Join us here. We are a positive, supportive bunch here. We have a moderator, Amanda. I didn't tell Amanda I was going to be doing a live today, so perhaps she's not here at the moment, but I'm sure she'll pop up at some point and she'll keep you engaged in the live chat. So it's a pleasure to have you, but without having to waste your time, let's delve straight into the bake. Like the other bakes we've undertaken, I've kept the variables exactly the same, including the ingredient selection, except for the flour, which we have a pinch of salt in here. The cake flour I picked up here is Snowflake. I have some information about it which I have left in the community page in previous posts. But what we also do to give you more value in these tutorials is that if there are specific ingredients that we want to inform you about, we update some of that information on the community page with pictures and descriptions and more information, just so that the session is interactive, informative, achievable, delivers you much value, so you are not in doubt. With that, the hope is that you can undertake your own bake in your home kitchen with great attitude and confidence that you're going to get the best result out of it. So there's ingredients remains the same. We have Flora margarine here. The quantities I will leave in the description box, but they are the same. I assume this is about 210 grams of Flora margarine that has been left to room temperature. The reason why I use margarine is because it has vegetable fat. It guarantees me a softer textured bake better than flour. Obviously I compromise on flavoring here, because if I had used butter has superior flavor compared to this, but I can make up by using the vanilla, which is my main flavor option in this recipe. We also have an addition of pure vegetable oil, which will add to the Flora margarine here. There is eggs, which will add moisture, texture and binding to the cake. Also color. There is caster sugar, into which I have added vanilla, and there is obviously the flour here. The ingredients are selected specifically to inform the goal that we are aiming for. The goal is to get a soft textured bake, and hopefully the ingredients I have chosen, which I have explained in detail in prior posts, in prior videos, should be able to inform you. For instance, buttermilk here adds moisture, but also slows down gluten production when added to mixes. It enhances the taste by giving it an acidic aftertaste and a complex taste to your cakes. But primarily, it also helps to slow down gluten, so also enhances how delicate your cake is likely to finish up as. With oil, enhances moisture, tenderizes and also adds to the texture we're aiming for. So the ingredient selection have been selected to support our outcome, but of course, as previously reiterated, the main goal is to see what the cake flour outcome is going to be like. I have been pleasantly surprised by the outcomes of our bakes, and significantly, just because if it's your first time here, so you know, we don't know the outcome of our bakes yet. Most of the bakes I have undertaken here, I had no idea what they were going to be like. So it was pleasantly surprising that at the end of each bake, our results were positive and the outcome were exactly as we had hoped for. So hopefully this should be the same. I'm gonna preheat, turn the oven on preheat, and then we're going to start with creaming our mix next. Our oven is preheated, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the margarine into which is going into our stand mixer here. I'm using the stand mixer here, but the quantity we are using can be used a hand mixer can be used here. But in all the testings I have used in all the testings I've used the mixer. So because I want to maintain the same variables, I have just decided to go with the stand mixer. But the quantities here are not large, so you could use a hand mixer just in case you don't have access to a stand mixer. I just want to cream this, and we're going to be creaming the margarine, sugar, and vanilla here for about 4 minutes, 45 minutes, which is the time frame we have used in the prior post. The weather is on our side today. I have explained that in these sessions you also want to understand that technique matters as much as the process you're undertaking, and a few other things can influence your outcome, such as weather conditions. If the weather is too warm and your butter is melting, it can affect your cake and the structure of it eventually. But the weather is on our side, so we're keeping the same variables, which is we're going to cream the sugar, butter, sugar, margarine. I keep saying butter, but it's margarine. But just so you know, you can replace the same quantity of margarine here with butter. This is one of the adaptable recipes where you can substitute certain ingredient elements. But I will reiterate that it is better to have an understanding of what your outcomes are and the ingredients, so that you know what can be substituted for what. So in this case, butter can be used in place of margarine, and that is completely fine. It enhances flavor. It gives you a tighter structure, and because butter settles back into solid from even after baking, the crumb is a little tighter, but it doesn't affect how delicate the crumb is by itself. So I hope that is clear. I'm going to cream that for 4 minutes, and I want to take some conversations in the chat, and then I'll be back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scrape the sides of the bowl here. And in previous ones, we've seen that the original margarine that we put in here, which was yellow looking, has increased in volume because it's creaming, and it's also changed color slightly. Now I employ the creaming method in this process specifically because it is the process that I am used to, and it also will enhance the formation of air pockets, which eventually, when other ingredients are added, will support the goal I am aiming for, which is to get a crumb that is delicate, soft textured. But also, most importantly, this crumb I am aiming for, whilst I want a softly textured cake that is with great taste and has a good mouth feel, the most important thing is I don't want to compromise on the structure of the cake entirely, because the cake is going to be optimized for stacking, which is to set the cake layers up, and this is going to form part of a 3-tiered cake. So it's important to also consider that whilst you're looking at a certain type of structure in your crumb build-up, you also want to make sure that the cake itself in its entirety is well structured to undertake when other layers or tiers of cake are towering over it. If it wasn't for that reason, which is the stacking purpose, for which I still have to maintain some structure to the cake, I probably would have settled for a kind of different type of sponge, considering the couple want a different kind of sponge texture. In this case, I would have probably settled for, say, a Genoese sponge, because it is lighter, it is soft textured, and it has like a very nice mouth feel too. However, because I'm going to be stacking this cake, I didn't want a situation where the cake was susceptible to collapsing, essentially. So we've creamed that for 2 minutes. I'm going to add the oil in and cream it for another 2 minutes, and then we'll see. Obviously, when we add the oil, it should change the consistency a little bit, but that's okay. So I'm going to add the oil here. I'm going to add the oil in here. And the creaming is undertaken at 3.5, so as in speed 3.5, which is medium high speed. Numbers 3.5, I mean. And whilst that is creaming, I'm going to assist the eggs by breaking the eggs and mixing them along slightly. Just so that it makes for easy additions here. We've got that creamed for another 2 minutes, and we're just going to have a look at what the texture is and consistency is in the bowl right here. I feel like this series has been repeated time and again. It can be so long that I am happy that we're nearly coming to an end with this one. But this is not going to be the last of the testing processes. There will be more to come in the future, from testing sugar, what type of sugar and what results you're likely to get. So keep an eye out. Another thing we've done is that we have other watchers or friends of ours choosing certain cakes, like old classics. Any preference you would like. The people have nominated those, and we'll be undertaking those live here. So I think on our list we have a lemon and poppy seed. We have our moderator Amanda's most preferred cake, which is a pineapple upside down. So I've been doing some research on it. So hopefully we should be back to bake some of those, so that it's a little more engaging for you as well. So if you're in the chat and you have a suggestion for a cake you would like to see me bake, put it in the chat there, and I'm sure I will have a look at it later. Also, there were questions that were asked by several other people. I'll be answering them shortly, but in the meantime, let's have a look in here and see what our mixture looks like. And I think, having had a look at the mixture in here and then scrape the bowl, it might probably be time to add the eggs in. And this is what we're looking at over here. Yeah, it is creamed well enough. So I'm just going to add the eggs in. It's going to start from slow of about a minute, but what I've done is I have beaten the eggs and broken all that the yolks into the egg whites, and it's all mixed partly before adding to the mixture here. In our previous post, this part was actually very exciting because we were mixing to see whether the emulsion will break. Because sometimes at this point you might probably have the emulsion breaking where your mixture looks rather curdled. But let's see if we're going to get a hat trick on this one, because in prior posts we didn't have that at all, and our mixture mixed in completely. We had a creamy looking homogeneous mix, which was actually very exciting, and it's the sort of excitement that is only baker related, because unless you're a baker like myself, you're not going to feel so excited about what a mixture in a stand mixer looks like. With that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off. Oh, actually we got a hat trick here, because yeah, exactly. So yeah, the mixture has come together nicely, but I'm just going to let that beat for, I'm just using the paddle attachment to scrape this out so that I don't have to employ the spatula to do that. But yes, we've got the mixture we want, which is actually exciting. Let me see. Our eggs are completely mixed in now. I'm kind of excited about what it looks like. Look at the consistency of that. Who wouldn't want that? But like I said, only a baker will understand how exciting this really is, right? So we've got that done, and the next thing here is to add the cake flour. I'm using the Snowflake brand of cake flour, in case you want to know. And on the mixer there is a fold function, so I'm going to use that slowly. At this point, you want to make sure that you don't overmix your ingredients, your flour into the mixture. The flour has 3/4 of a teaspoonful of baking powder and half a teaspoon of baking soda. The baking soda will react with the buttermilk here to also help with the rising and lift of the cake. I have buttermilk here, so I'm going to be alternating that with my flour. So almost half of the flour has gone in, and then we have more flour in here, and then the last part of buttermilk is gone in. Next, we have the final part of the flour, and just before the flour is completely mixed in, I'm just going to take that all together, and I'm going to scrape the sides of the bowl in here, and with the spatula I'm going to help this along. Consistency wise, I can tell you now, even by trying to mix the flour into the mixture, I find the butter here is very light. In the past with other flour in this testing process, when you get to this part where there's been liquid introduced into the flour, it's a little bit tight to stir together, if you like. So this observation, I hope, would aid the objective we are aiming for, which is a lightly textured bake. With that, I'm just going to leave it on fold function still. And with that done, our butter is mixed together. And if you're a little bit queasy about people using their hands when baking, then you want to look away now, because I'm just using my washed hands to get this butter in the bowl, and just okay, I'm just gonna mix this together, and then we're going to divide that into our baking. Right, I'm just gonna move this out of the way now. And I'm gonna mix that together, and whilst we're at it, if you're in the chat and you have a question, bear with me. I will come back and answer that accordingly. Okay, so Chidima, I see you have a question for me over there. I will come back to you with an answer. If you're asking what we are doing here, we are baking a vanilla cake, but this is a third or fourth part of a testing process where we bake with different sorts of flour, so we are able to determine what the structure of a cake looks like, because so far we have been optimizing for a very delicate, lightly textured crumb of the cake, and we've tried various flours using the same technique and ingredient options, except for a slight difference in the flour, and we've derived some good results. So this is, I think, fourth and the last part of the testing process. So I am splitting the butter into the tins. Over here, if you're very particular, you might want to mix, you might want to measure this, but I don't, so I can eyeball it. It makes no great difference here for me at all. So we have that done. Yes, with that, if you get the butter in, you can see it's not settled and it's not great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand this on the worktop. I can't do this at night. If I did this at night, my neighbors won't be happy with me. But I'm also going to create a slight hole in the middle. I should say I have found the weight of the butter a little light. I don't know if that has something to do with the gluten and the flour that we use, but it seems a little lighter than the previous bakes, especially using the same ingredients and process. So let's see. So our butter is divided into 2 pounds. I'm going to leave that in the oven and we'll come back and answer some questions. The cake is baking at 160 degrees C, and it should be about an hour to an hour 15 minutes. In the prior bakes, we've been able to derive our best result at an hour. So the time here is exactly 12:23. So at 1:23, or anytime between now 1:23 and 1:30, our bake should be done. So if you stay here for that long, perhaps we'll know. But what we will normally do is at the end of the bake, where the cake goes in the oven, we take a break. So consider it break time, where we go and get on with whatever else we need to do, and then we come back when the bake is undertaken. In the last two processes, we've been able to wait the entire period, which adds a whole different experience to the baking process, because my goal is to give you an exact feeling or experience of these bakes. I understand that I could take time and bake this before the start of their life and then introduce the pre-baked item, but that takes away from the experience I'm trying to bring on here, because I want to inspire confidence by making sure that you are part of the entire process from start to finish. So the part where we take a break, go back and come back, is a time management issue. But in the last two bakes, we've been able to stay on course the entire time and waited the bake out. So I don't know how this is going to go. If we get interactive and engaging and there are more questions to answer, I'll stay on. I also have some client cupcakes that I'll be baking, so perhaps we'll undertake that bake together and then we'll make use of our time here. That said, perhaps let's consider making our cupcakes whilst we're still here. And if you're still in the chat, hello there. We've just finished our first bake, which is now in the oven, and we are attempting to undertake the baking of some cupcakes over here. In the other testing session, somebody was asking whether I would recommend oil bakes for butter bakes and which is better preferred. Now I answered that question, but I realized that when I went back to trimming that video, that question may have been lost. So I'm attempting to answer it again here, just so that it can give you a little bit of value. Now, oil and butter or margarine are almost the same thing, if you like. They have, well, butter it has protein and fat contents in there with some moisture or liquids in there, and fat, which is oil, is 100% fat, if you like. But of course, the various, by observing them as separate things, they are completely different. You have the butter or margarine as a solid fat, and you have the oil as a runny and liquid fat, if you like. So do I recommend oil or butter? It's neither here nor there. It all depends on one's goals, what the recipe requires, and what you are aiming to achieve. So if the recipe calls for oil, it has been optimized and formulated for the use of oil completely. Because with the use of oil, there are also structural issues, because the thing with margarine or butter is that because they come in solid form, in terms of structure, they are very set. You're going to be able to make them like spreadable to use. But say if you employ the creaming method, the fat, the the fat, as in the margarine or butter in the creaming method, is significant, and that is because the sugar crystals dig into the fat, which is a solid fat here, wrapping around itself to create the air pockets. Now these air pockets become very important during the rise of the cake in the oven when it is cooking. Also, with the liquids that are found in the solid fat, which is butter or margarine, they end up evaporating as part of the bake, tenderizing it in the process and enhancing the texture. Now if you took that solid fat and put it away and wanted to substitute it with liquid fat, being oil, you completely eliminate the process of the air pocket building process. So to be able to supplement one for the other, you just have to understand what the recipe details are and what your outcomes is. But it's not as straightforward as taking one thing to replace with the other. But the reason why I substituted oil with a bit of margarine here is because I was trying to employ the properties of the oil that will enhance the texture of the cake, which will advance into the goals of my baking process, which is that I was optimizing for texture and a delicate crumb. So a light textured delicate crumb was what I was optimizing for. But what I didn't do was to eliminate the solid fat completely to replace it with oil, because then it requires me to undertake a whole different process, as in either the reverse creaming method or perhaps the bowl method, where I will mix my liquids in one bowl and then pour them into my dry ingredient, and that in itself is a whole different technical process. And also, because we are building this from the same variables from the other testing process, it just didn't make sense to undertake a whole different process. So I wanted to maintain the same technique and process that I had employed in other series, just so that the outcome and assessment is fair. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So I have my ingredient selection here. I have my cupcakes lined, but just to make it convenient, I am going to be employing the use of a hand mixer for this process. It's a simple vanilla cupcake. I think I've organized the ingredients right, so I can just move on to the process quickly. So what I've done is, it's the same cake recipe that I have undertaken in previous series that I have just taken and adapted slightly. I will leave the information in the description box. Actually, I do think I have undertaken the baking of these cupcakes. I have done this quite a lot, so I tend to forget which is what. But I will leave any useful information, ingredient quantities and everything you need to know about this in the description box for you. The thing about a hand mixer that I don't like very much is the control of the mixing thing here, this mechanism. It's hard to control it, that is, get it lower or in a way that you would much prefer. Whereas with the stand mixer, I tend to feel like I have a lot more control. So that's the only difference. But I think I have also tested the use of a hand mixer and a stand mixer in one of my very first videos when I started YouTube. It is, looking back, I could have done a better job, and perhaps in future I will look at redoing that video again. But it's still informative, so I will link it in the description box for you. So in here goes the margarine with caster sugar and some vanilla. I'm going to cream this for about a minute and a half, and then we will add some oil and keep it going. With a cupcake, when creaming, you want to make sure that you don't over cream and break the structure of the solid fat, because by so doing, you are also likely to get your cupcake to rise over the lid. And by the way, because we're not testing the cupcakes, we can distribute the butter in the cupcake cases and leave it to stay on the countertop whilst the cake is still baking. So I've done this for, I think, is it a minute? And this is the consistency we're looking for. With cupcakes, I find that I have to be very careful to not beat the fat and sugar mixture into a super light consistency, because by so doing I end up affecting the texture and rise of the cupcakes, and then they rise over and spill across the lip of the cupcake case. So I am careful not to do that. So I've got that mixed in here. I'm going to continue creaming that until the structure is a little lighter. Okay, it is mixed in enough to have changed color and consistency here. Now I am going to add the flavorless oil in there and mix it together before I employ the hand mixer. If I can help it, my goal is to ensure that the cupcakes all have an even rise, but because the cupcakes are going to be frosted, covering the top completely with buttercream, I am not completely fussed about that. At best, at least the cupcakes, I hope, do not rise over and spill. Okay, now this is exactly what I am looking to achieve over here. I think I'm gonna change my spatula. See, when I tell you baking is not perfect, believe me, I'm just gonna get a different spatula. My spatulas seem to come off, the handles come off the tops, which can be annoying. So I prefer a straight spatula that doesn't have like the handle is not different from the tip. I guess you know what I mean, but anyway, that is beside the point. And I'm going to mix in my egg slightly before adding it into the mixture. If you have a question in the chat for me, please bear with me. I will answer you in a moment. Now, if you've been here before, you will know how excited we get about this part of the process when we mix the eggs into the mixture butter and it looks like this and it hasn't curdled, it hasn't broken. So I think we have had that done now. As we've been talking, let's have a look at the butter. So the butter has mixed. Look, it's not broken. If you're a baker, tell me you understand how exciting this part of the process is, that your emulsion hasn't separated and it's all held together over here. Look, hopefully I don't stir and overmix this part too much. Yeah. Look. Yeah. All right, I think at this stage I could do well by adding the flour a little at a time, but I'm not going to use the hand mixer. I'm going to use the spatula to mix this in, and that is because I can't control the hand mixer, so I don't want to start mixing everything vigorously. So what I'm going to do is I'm adding the flour and I am mixing it in with the spatula, folding in from the outside in, right? And then when everything seems to have mixed together, I'll then employ the hand mixer to give it a quick mix, and that's it. So there goes in the buttermilk also to add moisture. and then the final part of the flour goes in. And we'll get the buttermilk in here. We are about 40 minutes out and our cake will be done. Who is excited? Who can predict the result of our bake here? I did say that I haven't undertaken the use of cake flour exclusively, so I don't know what the result is going to be. So if you have any suggestions of what you think or predictions of what you think our outcome will be, let me know in the chat. Now I'm going to mix this together. And there we are. We'll scrape the sides in. And that's our cupcake batter done. So I'm going to wipe the top off, and then we're going to fill our cupcake liners. So we have our cupcake liners now here. And over here, I also have a scoop, which I am going to use to distribute the cupcakes. I use the scoop so that the cupcake batter doesn't get stuck to the scoop. And the water into which I'm dipping the scoop is warm water. It prevents the butter sticking onto the scoop. Interestingly, because this is a layered cake recipe that I have turned into a cupcake recipe, the only difference here is that I don't use the full amount of self-raising flour. I use a third of the amount. So we have 450 grams of self-raising flour, 450 grams of flour, but only 150 is self-raising flour, because I find that when I have used the complete amount of self-raising flour, I have lost control of obviously the rising agent in this flour, which is added at the point of production, and it leads to such a big rise, and then the cupcakes kind of fall over the lip of the cupcake case. So after testing it for a while to solve that problem, I find that a third of the flour, self-raising flour, mixed into 2/3 of the amount is what does the trick for me, and enhances the rise of the cake and gives me better quality. So we're talking about 450 grams of flour in total, but 150 grams of self-raising flour plus 300 grams of plain or all-purpose flour. And we've made about 24 cupcakes here.